All right, 4 weeks ago, we started this series entitled No Matter What, and this is a values series. We're talking about the values and non-negotiables of our church, and it's a good timing for that because we're jumping into 2020. And the reason why we're talking about our values is because we believe that values drive behavior. Values drive behavior. I've been saying this over the Fred campus the last 3 weeks. I've been telling them, hey, if you want to know what somebody values, just watch how they behave. Just watch how they behave. We will live out our values. So it's important for us as a church to talk about what do we value? What are the most important things? Because those are the things that are going to be driving our behavior. And we don't want to be a church that just knows our values or can talk about our values. We want to be a church that's actually living as those values are the most important things. We just go, a healthy church is a church that is willing and wanting. They want to get better, and so they're going to keep diving into their values to create those spiritual rhythms in their life. But unfortunately, here's what I find as a pastor in ministry the last 15 years, that oftentimes the church and followers of Jesus will they'll treat kind of their relationship with Jesus and the things they value very similar to how most of us, not all, but most of us will treat the gym, okay? A lot of you start out this year and said, I want to value the gym, and it changed your behavior for like a day, all right? And then you gave up, right? And a lot of times we treat our spirituality like that. And so I just wrote down here, again, not all of us, but some of us, there's a lot of us who won't consistently get our butts out of bed and get to the gym. And when we do get to the gym, we don't want to lift anything because it's heavy. And then we don't listen to our trainer, right? We don't listen to him because he's asking us to do things that are going to make us get sweaty. And I hate getting sweaty. And then our trainer is going to actually tell us what we should eat and shouldn't eat. And how dare he tell me what I should or shouldn't eat. And yet, some of us, because summer's coming, okay? And yet, some of us are going to get to the month of June. Guys, you're going to get to the local pool, and you're going to take your shirt off, and you're going to go, what happened? What in the world? I didn't know I had to work out, right? You're going to act surprised. And that's a shame because we all know that narrative. We all know how that works. And if you want something different, when you get to the month of June, then you've got to do something different now. And I am shocked how many people that land in my office who never have opened up the Bible, that won't spend a minute in prayer, rarely get to church, and yet when they find themselves in crisis, will get in my office and go, you know who's at fault here? The church. You know who's at fault here? God. And I'm looking at them going, listen, you haven't done any effort. You haven't done any work. Yeah, you showed up to church once, like in the last 5 years, but you've not been engaged in this relationship that God so desperately desires with you. And so, listen, we want to be a church that's spiritually healthy. And if we're going to be spiritually healthy, then we got to be wanting and willing to jump into the rhythms that are going to produce the best things in our life. Let me just ask you this question, all right? Not to bring shame or guilt. Let me just ask you. When's the last time somebody asked you what gym you go to? When's the last time somebody who actually walked up to you and said, whoa, where do you work out? And if you can't come up with a reason or think about the last time somebody said that, do you know why nobody's asking you? Because you don't look like you go to the gym. That's why. Nobody's asking because you probably don't go. And for some reason, we act shocked in the context of our spiritual journey with Jesus. We're not putting in the effort or willing to keep moving forward, and it doesn't produce that fruit that God is calling us to have in our lives. And so, listen, we want to be a church this year, 2020, that's going to be willing and wanting to change up some things. Because in that change, we just believe that we're going to be better. Once upon a time, 2,000 years ago, there was the first local church, a church you read about in the book of Acts. This was the groundbreaking movement. And when you read the story of the first church, you just see they valued some things. And they valued them, and they held on to them, and they lived them out, and they brought them into their daily life. And it was so powerful in the context of the world. The world actually found the church to be irresistible. Which is crazy because the first church, the first local church really had nothing going for it. I mean, it didn't have any buildings. It had very, very little influence in the world. It didn't even have the Bible yet. I mean, they were just, on the ground, just getting this thing going, and yet they lived in such a way That people who didn't know anything about God or wanted nothing to do about God all of a sudden found the church to be irresistible. And that's why 2,000 years later, you're here. Because there are people that lived in such a way that affected how they behaved, and they behaved in such a way that the world took notice, changed the world. And we think a church that 2,000 years later, if they would hold on to the same values that church held on to, that they could actually change their community. They could even have the power and influence to change the world. And so this year, I want to be committed. I want to encourage you this year to be committed no matter what, to do everything you can to embrace the same version of faith that the first church held on to 2,000 years ago. So 3 weeks ago, we just talked about week one. The first thing the early church valued was this irresistible pursuit of their relationship with Jesus. And this year, 2020, we want to spend more time with Jesus than ever before. We got to keep first things first. And I know you're busy and I'm busy and we have all these things that are grabbing our attention and our time, but we got to keep Jesus first. We want to spend more time reading the scriptures. We want to spend more time reading. Over at the Fred campus, I said, Jesus, some of you just got to get a Bible. You don't even have a Bible. You're just showing up every week, so just get a Bible. And I have heard all the things, well, Matt, when I read the Bible, it's just super boring and I don't like it. And I just go, I don't care, okay? I don't care. Just get the Bible. Open to the book of John. It's 2/3 through the way, and just open and start reading. I'm telling you, if you just keep showing up and you keep getting into it, you will see it become a benefit in your life. So you just got to get a Bible, all right? And if you don't have a Bible, just steal someone's in here. Just take it, all right? Just start reading the Bible. Spend more time. We're going to spend more time this year because more time with Jesus never hurts. It only helps. And then week 2, we said, hey, listen, we got to do life in the context of community and groups. Man, you got to get in a group. If you're not in a group, you got to get in a group. Because this morning you're in rows, and rows are great for our gatherings, and we gather in rows, but you also got to get into a circle. You've got to have some people who know you and you know them, and you got to start developing community, because really life change happens in the context of community. When people know you and can love you and serve you and are for you, that changes up the game a little bit. So if you're not in a group, you got to get in a group. And one of the reasons why we don't get in the group, because people are messy and we don't like other people's mess. But listen, you guys got to remember this morning, you're messy too. And you need other people to do for you what you need to do for them. And so we got to get into a group. And then last week, Sean talked about the idea of love, that you have a story and I have a story. And through your story, you're able to share just this incredible love that Jesus and God has for you. And this morning, what we're talking about is this idea of humility. And so to get to the scriptures here, I just want to play a game with you called Who's the GOAT? All right, who's the GOAT? Now, if you're a sports person, you know what GOAT stands for, right? Any sports people in here? GOAT, greatest of all time. All right, and so if you didn't know that, that's what it means, the greatest of all time. So I want to throw a couple of slides up. It's going to be two people on the slide, and there's an argument about who's the greatest of all time in the context of the sport they play. So you'll see how it goes, all right? So here's the first slide here, just basketball, this easy one, okay? So LeBron James is actually, he did an interview, I think a year ago, 2 years ago, where he actually said, I am the GOAT. He actually said that. And that's a GOAT move, all right? When you say you're the GOAT, that's a GOAT move. And what's funny is right after that interview, he had one of his worst games ever in his basketball career, while we're talking about humility, all right? And so he has said he's the GOAT, but when I was growing up, all right, and maybe you're with me, the GOAT was Michael Jordan. You remember Michael Jordan? He was the GOAT, all right? He was the greatest of all time. Anytime you're on the playground and you're playing basketball, you always thought about being Michael Jordan, because he was just the greatest of all time. But I would still argue that Michael Jordan is the GOAT. And then you can jump into other sports. So baseball, I love baseball. I think baseball is the best sport ever. And if you don't believe that, then you're probably not a Christian, but you'll get there in your faith, okay? I just think it's the best. It's the best. It's the best sport. And if you just Google greatest of all time when it comes to baseball players, Babe Ruth's going to be on there. And he's just one of the most iconic players. And then when I was growing up, I mean, really the best player of my generation was Barry Bonds. And that's kind of controversial because somewhere along his career, for some reason, his head got double the size of what it was originally. He probably says he drank milk, but it's probably steroids, all right? But anyways, a lot of people, you just can't argue with his stats. I mean, that dude just was hitting so many home runs. He was just a great baseball player. And then there's just so many like iconic greats. There's Mickey Mantle and Lou Gehrig, all these incredible baseball players of old. And then you can jump into football if you talk about the greatest of all time. I know the guy in the top right, he gives you some heartburn, right? right? But listen, he's got a ring for every finger. I mean, this guy has achieved some great things, and he's won a lot of championships. But when I was growing up, when you're playing football in the backyard with your friends, the guy that you always thought about being was Joe Montana. Anybody with me? It was Joe Montana. That's who you would think, yeah, that's who you wanted to be. So if you were the quarterback, you were Joe Montana. And if you're a wide receiver, who were you? Jerry Rice, that's right. And so that's just who you thought it would be. And so there's an argument about who the greatest of all time is. But I was watching a UFC fight a couple of weeks ago, and Tom Brady showed up at the arena in Vegas. And I quote, the announcer said, "The GOAT is here. The GOAT is here, the greatest of all time." So anyways, there's an argument there. The next slide kind of gives another guy. Okay, so Peyton Manning's in the conversation, right? And for some of you, you want him to be the GOAT, but I'm telling you he's not, all right? That other guy is the GOAT. All right, so I don't want to say it because it hurts me, but he's probably the GOAT. And then we've got, so you can kind of go into different arenas. Here's another example. Now listen, I'm a big fan of chicken sandwiches. If you ever hang out with me, you can ask Sean when we go out to lunch and when we're traveling together on conferences and things. I always get chicken sandwiches. I love chicken sandwiches, buffalo chicken sandwich, grilled chicken sandwich, fried chicken sandwich, doesn't matter. But I'm telling you, the greatest chicken sandwich of all time is the #1 at Chick-fil-A, all right? I'm just telling you that. And Popeyes made a run at it last year. They tried, and that sandwich is garbage, all right? I'm telling you right now, it's garbage. I don't make political statements from the stage. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, who I vote for, or make those kind of statements, but I'm telling you right now that the Chick-fil-A sandwich, #1, is the greatest of all time, and if that offends you and you don't like it, you can go to another church. Don't even care. I don't even care. It's the best, okay? And you can try to argue with me, but I'm telling you, you're wrong, all right? So anyways, we do this in our world. I mean, if you just want to, like, guys, you know this. If you want to have a conversation that lasts for hours, just get together somewhere, sit down, and just go, I think this player is the greatest of all time. And 5 hours later, you're about to punch each other, right? We argue about these things, about who is the greatest. Now, let me just say this. I want our church to be great. I want you and your relationship with Jesus to be great. I was thinking about this the last couple of weeks. 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, and I'm not taking anything away from what the last 30 plus years of history at Rocky has been. There's been some incredible stories here, but here's what I want, and you should want this too, and I would hope the leaders who have come before us would say, yes, that's exactly it, but I want this season of our church to be the greatest of all time. I want it to be the greatest of all time. I want us to be great. I want us to be able to tell some amazing stories 50 years from now. I hope 50 years from now that the leaders of this church get together and if they could look over at that point, almost 80 plus years of ministry, and go, man, what were some of the great times in the history of Rocky? This is what I want. I want them to point to this season and go, whoa. There was something about that year or that 5-year span that was amazing. They were able to accomplish and get through some incredible things, some really great things. But here's the kind of the way that we view it a little bit different than the world. I want us to be great, but not in the way that the world defines greatness. Not in the way the world defines greatness, because the world kind of recognizes and will begin to organize greatness through the filter of talent or achievement or wealth and power. It's why we're drawn to athletes and movie stars and politicians and royalty. And yet I want us to be great for a totally different reason. And Jesus talks about this. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to Matthew chapter 20. There's a story here. I love this story. This narrative happens a couple of times with Jesus and his disciples. And if I could pick, like, if you could say, Matt, your top 5 moments, if you could just be present in the midst of the New Testament, this would be one of them. Because I think this conversation here is groundbreaking. I think one of the reasons why the church is here 2,000 years later is because of, one of the reasons is this conversation. This conversation changes everything. And look what Jesus says here, starting in verse 20. The mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons and, kneeling down, asked a favor of him. Look what she says, verse 21. What is it you want, he asked. She said, grant that one of these 2 sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. So here's what's happening. The disciples know, all right, they believe that Jesus is the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. That's why they're following him. They've left everything. And in their mind, he's literally going to build an earthly kingdom. a palace, so to speak. I mean, he's going to be the most powerful, influential, have the most money. I mean, people are just going to do what he says. So the disciples thinking this go, we want to get a seat like in the pecking order of leadership. We can't be number one because he's the GOAT, but we could be number two. And the disciples here pull a move just like my girls do every single week at my home. They're thinking if we go and ask Jesus ourselves, he'll probably tell us no, we'll send our mom. Because if we send our mom, he can't say no to mom. You never can say no to mom. And so they send your mom, which I would remind you, never send your mom. All right, don't do that. But they send their mom, just like my older ones will send their younger sister, because I'm prone to say yes to her more because she's cute. She got a cute voice. But the older ones come, and I'm like, no, all right, absolutely not. But they send her. So this is what they do here. They go, man, we want a spot in the kingdom. And so we'll send our mom to fight for us. Verse 22, Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. Jesus said to them, can you drink the cup I'm going to drink? In other words, are you going to be able to handle what it takes to be number two? Foreshadowing the cross is the thing that we just remembered through taking communion ourselves through the bread and the cup. I don't think you get it. I don't think you know what's going to be required to be number two. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink my cup, but to sit at my right or the left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. Now, when the 10 heard about this, the other 10 disciples, they were indignant with the two brothers, not because of what they asked, but because they asked first. And Jesus called them together and said, you know, boys, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise what? Authority over them. And then verse 26, this is one of the reasons why the church is here 2,000 years later. Here it is. Not so with you. Not so with you. Guys, you know the leaders of this world, the most influential people, the most powerful people, the people that have all the money. You know those people that go, yeah. That's why we want a seat at the table. And Jesus goes, listen, not so with you, but instead whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And I would love to be there in that moment because I think their jaws are dropping and going, what is he talking about? 27, whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Now he's just getting crazy. He's silly talk. 28, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus goes, boys, come on in here just real quick. Come on. And knowing their hearts. And okay, now you're sending your mom to me. Just come here for a sec. Come here. Who wants to be great? Who here wants to be great? All the hands go up. I do. I want to be great. Okay. How many of you want to be like in my kingdom? You want to be at the top. You right here. Jesus goes, great. That's awesome. So glad to hear that. Listen, in my kingdom, if you want to be at the top, then you got to fight for the bottom. What's he talking about? He goes, listen. If you want to be the best leader of all, yeah, I do. Okay. Well, then you've got to be the greatest servant of all. And I think the disciples are just going, I don't know if I want to be great. What's he talking about? I thought we got to be at the top, but he's talking about being at the bottom. I don't get this. He actually will sum it all up. Jesus in verse 16 says this, so the last will be first, and the first will be last. What? Jesus goes, listen, in my kingdom, we're going to do it different. In my kingdom, it's not, you're not going to fight to be at the top and get everybody to serve you. You're going to fight to be at the bottom so you can serve others. He goes, listen, true greatness isn't found in finding people who think you're great and having them serve you. That's how the world does it. But boys, that's not how we're going to do it. You're going to find true greatness by serving others, by thinking about others. He goes, I want you to pursue greatness. Just not the kind of greatness that the world pursues. You're followers of me? Yeah, we are. Well, listen, your motive for being great is different. And how you get there is going to be different because our motive isn't for others to notice us. Our motive is for us to notice others. That's how we're going to change the world. That's the posture of the first local church. It's the posture that this church should be taking. It's others. It's others first, others first, others first. It's not about us, it's about others. And so I'd ask you this, well, what's the secret of doing that even better? Because we live in a culture that does not promote that at all. Last night, I was driving back home from the Frederick campus. We were there all day for basketball, and I had my two oldest in the car with me. And my oldest, Raya, she said, Dad, what are you talking about tomorrow at church? I said, I'm talking about humility. She goes, what's that? So that hurt my parenting just a little bit, all right? It hurt my heart a little bit. I go, what? She goes, what's that? What is humility? And I said, it's valuing others above yourself. And she just goes, huh. You know why it's so foreign to her? Because really nobody's promoting that. Nobody. I mean, just go watch, TV. I mean, her friends. I mean, we live in a culture that's you. It's all about you. And you should do you, and you should get what you want, and you do what's best for you. And Jesus comes along and goes, not so with you. If you want to be great in my kingdom, then you got to be known for how you serve. And the greatest way to be the best servant is to understand more about this idea of humility. So the Apostle Paul kind of takes this idea and he begins to frame it up for the local church. He gives us some application. Look what he says, Philippians chapter 2, starting in verse 1. He says this, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one of mind. Essentially he's saying, listen, if you love Jesus or if Jesus has made any impact in your life, do me a favor. Get on the same team. Keep fighting for the most important things. Look what he says, verse 3. So do nothing, and nothing there means nothing, all right? Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Do nothing like that. Instead, in humility, here it is, value others above yourselves. Value others. How do you get there? Through deeper levels of humility. Verse 4, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mind as Jesus. Think like Jesus thought, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, look at this, he made himself nothing. He made himself nothing. And by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, what did he do? He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. So Paul goes, look, guys, it's about humility. Remember when Jesus said, you're not come to be served, but to serve? Man, if God came down to this earth and took the form of a human, he didn't have to, but he chose to, and that's even a step of humility. The Creator taking the form of the creation. If God, who's the greatest of all time, he's the GOAT. If the GOAT decides not to be served but to serve, and he demonstrates that by coming down to this earth and taking the form of a human, and then listen, he goes, and to what extent? That he goes to the cross for who? For you? Then you too, if you're a follower of Jesus, you too, if you're part of the local church, should be living a life that's filled with humility. And how do you get there? He goes, listen, you got to make yourself nothing. You got to make yourself nothing. Humility is the key. C.S. Lewis will say it like this. Many of you have heard this quote before. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. Paul says you got to make yourself nothing. You've got something, but you got to make it and turn it into nothing. So I've just got this little visual aid, all right? So just humor me. It's pretty simple, but I think it proves the point. And they say that if you do visual aids and you remember stuff, all right? So I want you to remember some things. So let me just, I'm going to explain some of this stuff, what it is, and then we'll jump in. So, oh man. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this bin right here, nothing special about this bin. I just took this from my basement, had Christmas stuff in it, and now it's empty. All right, so anyways, this is the world, all right? This is the world we live in. We all live in the same world. This is where you live. This is your neighbors, your coworkers, where you go grocery shopping. That's the world, okay? Now, this cylinder is you. This cylinder is you. All right, the cylinder itself is you. And what's inside this cylinder is, I've got ping pong balls, all right? And the ping pong balls are your something, because everybody's got something. You have something and I have something. And we can all talk about our some things, but you've been given something and I've been given something. You have time. The fact that you're here this morning is something. You're alive. So you've got something. And so you've got time, you've got energy, you've got resources, you've got skills, you have abilities, you've got stuff, all right? You've got some things. You've got some things in your life. And you get to determine what you're going to do with your some things between today and whatever day is your last day on this earth. And here's what Paul says. Your some things, here's the goal of your life. Your some things need to become nothing, just like Jesus, especially if you're a follower of Jesus. If you're a follower of Jesus, then you got to take this really serious. Because if at the core of your faith is a guy who claims to be the Son of God, and if he is who he says he is, all right, that guy, this is one of the most important things that he'll say, that God himself did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but instead, what did he do? He took the form of a man, and he said, I have come not to be served, but to serve, and to give him my life as a ransom for many. So if you're a follower of Jesus, you got to take this really serious. You got to give this a lot of thought. Now, if you're not a follower of Jesus this morning, if you're just here checking us out, or you're skeptical of the local church, and you think we're all a bunch of hypocrites and we just want to take all your money, all right, whatever. Here's the thing. Even if you're not a follower of Jesus this morning, you should still listen in to what I'm about to say, because what I'm about to say is true, whether you're a Christian or not. Here's what I mean by that. At the end of your life, this is a funeral kind of conversation. And if you don't think about what people are going to say at your funeral, you should, because I do. It's probably because I'm at funerals quite a bit, and I've experienced some really awesome funerals, and I've also been a part of some really awful funerals. This is a conversation that's going to be had at your funeral, because some of us, we're using our somethings to build a resume, and here's what Jesus is saying. I don't want you to build a resume, I want you to build a legacy. You know what a resume is? A resume is everything about you. It's all about you. When you hand in a resume, it's look at me, look what I did, look at what school I went to, look what I built, look what I accomplished. Me, right? Half the stuff you write there is not even true anyways, right? But you just fill that resume, it's me. If you live your life for yourself at your funeral, it's going to be depressing. It's awful. The most amazing funerals I've ever been to are people who live their life in such a way not to build a resume, but to leave a legacy. It doesn't matter if you're a follower of Jesus or not. This principle applies to you. The only difference is if you're a follower of Jesus, this is one of the most important things. We got to get our somethings to become nothings, and when we do, we leave a legacy, not a resume. And when I have my funeral, I want people to get up here and talk way more about the legacy I left than the resume that I built. And I hope you do too. The reason why Jesus came down to this earth, lived a perfect life for 33 years, and then gave his life up on the cross, the reason why we're talking about it 2,000 years later is because he left a legacy. He didn't build a resume. And Paul says he could have built a resume because he was the Son of God, but he chose not to. He chose to live his life in such a way that we're still talking about him. Why? Because nobody just demonstrated a level of humility and served at such a capacity than Jesus Christ. You got to talk about him. That's why every major world religion in the world they've got a statement on Jesus. You want to know why? Because his humility, you can't pass up on it. Every single world religion has a statement about Jesus Christ. Why? Because he left a legacy that was so loud you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. You have to have a statement on this guy. And if you're a follower of Jesus, it's a big conversation, but even if you're not, you should still think about this. So this is what happens. This is why we talk about our values the last couple of weeks. This is why we say, listen, you gotta spend more time with Jesus, and you gotta get in a group, because this is what is gonna promote even deeper levels of humility in your life. So for the sake of the analogy, this water is Jesus, okay? And so when you jump in with more time with Jesus, when you show up, this is what I believe, at church gatherings like this morning, when you do what Jesus asked you to do, you allow Jesus to come into your life a little bit. And you know this to be true. If you've believe that Jesus is who he says he is, you know that Jesus starts to mess around with stuff in your life, don't you? You know this. He starts messing around. And you didn't even know that, but all of a sudden he starts messing around with your time and your energy. And then some of you're figuring this out. He starts messing with your money, right? And so this is just what happens. He just jumps in because he doesn't want a part of it. He wants all of it. This is why you got to spend more time with Jesus. And so you allow him to start coming into your life. And so you're like, man, this is nice. But here's the first trap that some of you fall into because you've done a little bit, or you showed up at church like once in the last month, or you gave $1 last week or something, right? And you're going, I don't see any difference. Nothing has changed. And I go, well, yeah, no, duh. Like, it's going to take a little time. It's going to take a little time. You're going to have to jump into these rhythms a little bit. Man, I read a verse last week, and it just, I took my shirt off at the pool, and it looks the same. I don't get it, right? He says, no, you got to keep jumping in. This is an everyday thing. Every single day. You know, every single day I get up and I think one of my first thoughts every single day is I think about who? Me. I don't know if you're like me, but I just think about me a whole lot. So every single day I go, no, it's not the most important thing. I got to spend more time with Jesus today. I got to get into the Bible. I got to pray. I got to spend time with people that are like-minded like me. And so maybe you showed up a couple of weeks ago and you're going, man, I'm showing up and this and that, but I don't really think things are changing. I go, well, you got to just keep showing up. You got to keep showing up. If this year you just go to the gym one time, Okay, so anyways, so you got to spend more time. So that's why we want to encourage you this year, spend more time with Jesus. So here's what starts happening. You're going to spend more time. You're going to spend more time. You're going to spend more time. You're going to show up at the gathering more and more and more and more. And then there's this, oh, so close. Oh, no, it's so close. Okay, so anyway, you're going to get to this point where the first thing will happen. All of a sudden, Jesus is going to go, hey, let's have this conversation in your life. This little thing right here that nobody knows about or how you spend your time or whatever, right? He's going to start getting into that a little bit. And here's what happens. He's just going to have that influence. And finally, you're going to get to a point where then you're just going to, there you go. I just did something I don't usually do, right? Wow, I usually don't care about those people, but man, all of a sudden I care about those people. I didn't want to give, but I never give to anything, but I just had to give to that. And this is what's happening. You're allowing Jesus to start having some space in your life, and he's taking your something, and it's kind of moving into nothing. But here's the first trap. Some of you had that initial like, woo, like that first or second workout, but then you stopped. You stopped. But you're walking around like you did some incredible things. You're walking around like you're the GOAT. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you get to the end of this year, you start walking around, you go, I went to the gym twice this year. Whoa! No one's impressed, okay? And some of you, you jumped in and you started, and a couple of balls fell off, and you got so excited about these things in your life. I mean, you're just like, look at me. I served this year. What did you do? Just that one time at Rocky.Church. Look at me, I'm amazing. I'm like Jesus, I served. Or you showed up this past week and look at me, I gave $1. Wow, yeah, that's right. I gave. And I go, that's awesome, but you still got a whole lot of something. And if the goal of your life is to get to the end of your life with nothing, you're not going at a very fast rate. And so we get stuck here. Well, look at me, I go to church once a month. And listen, these things are good, but I'm just telling you, you fooled yourself. Well, I serve every week at Rocky. I go, well done, but Jesus isn't talking about just an hour of your Sunday. He's talking about your whole life. And so a pastor gets up here and he starts preaching. You're like, man, I need to spend more time. So anyways, you start spending more time with Jesus, right? Maybe after this, some of you, and you get into a group because life change happens in the context of groups. And yeah. And now this is what I call like the summer camp experience. This is what our high school students experience. They go to summer camp, we take their cell phone away, and they realize there's more to life than just a cell phone, and they spend more time with Jesus, and they come back, and they go, I'm giving it all, right? I'm giving him all. He's going to have my whole life. And like, this is we're almost halfway now. There's a lot of nothing here, but there's also still a lot of something. And see, here's the thing here. At the end of the day, and in the back of the road too, it's easier to see the something than the nothing, isn't it? The something still stands out because it's colorful and it's loud and it still takes up a lot. It's more noticeable. And some of you, there was a day in your life where you just had this, maybe it was even the day you made a decision to follow Jesus, or the day you say, you know what, in the context of my relationship, I'm going to value purity. Or there's a day you say, you know what, God, I'm going to manage my money in such a way because I realize you're not trying to steal my money, but it's all yours, and you call me to manage it, and you want what's best for me, and so that's what I'm going to do. Or if you're a middle school or high school student in here, you got to the place where you said, man, one of the most important things in my life is to honor my mom and dad. Any parents give an amen to that? Okay. I'm going to serve them. I'm going to think more about my parents when I think about me. That would change the world. And so I say, so you started good, but then you also stalled out somewhere along the way, because this is what happens. You get all excited, but then you get, it's a couple months after camp, and you're like, I told God I was going to give him all my money. I mean, I still want some of my money. So you kind of go back into, and you're trying to okay, this is the money one. Let's just see. And you're just wrestling now, okay? Because he's got some nothing, but there's still a lot of something, and you're wrestling, and I'm just telling you, you're just never, it just doesn't work, all right? You're never going to get those somethings and try to cram them back into your life and feel anything that's good. It just doesn't happen. But that's what you're trying to do a little bit. Or there is a day where you say, you know what, God, in the context of my relationship, I choose purity. But you didn't know this girl was coming, right? And so now this girl's here, and you're like, why did I say that? And so you're just wrestling. But I'm telling you, at the end of the day, the goal of your life is to get you something to become nothing. That's the goal. That's the goal. And that's empty. Okay, and so then it's just more, all right? It's more Jesus, because your goal is to get nothing out of your something. And this is one of the most important conversations. So you choose humility, and now you're going to care about other people, because you realize at the end of the day you want to build a legacy and not a resume. And so this is your life. This is what's supposed to be happening in your life. Your somethings becoming nothings. And then here's the beautiful thing, okay? This is the great analogy of the church. I've run out of water. Okay, so this is what happens here, all right? Okay, good. Okay, now, here's the cool part, all right? When you allow your something to become nothing, who gets your something? It's not a trick question. Okay, listen, let me try again. When you allow your something to become nothing, who gets your something? Yeah. All these people around you. Question, when was the last time somebody said to you, what church do you attend? Hey, what church do you attend? Hey, question, why do you care about that person over there who doesn't care anything about you? Question, why would you give anything? Why would you pay for that guy's lunch? Hey, just a question. Hey, Bob, just a question. We worked together for a couple of years, but I've been hearing that you serve at Upward Basketball every single Saturday for 2 months. That sounds exhausting. Why would you do that? You know why they're asking? Because they're starting to see some nothing in the midst of your something. You know what that is? It's humility. Valuing others above yourself. When's the last time somebody said to you, what church do you attend? You know what's a shame? That I find in the context of the community in which I live, and the people who I love, and the people who I'm called to serve, actually think it blows their mind that I would choose to be humble and to serve and to love and to give. They think that's radical in the context of church, and friends, it should be normal. People should never be shocked, and yet they are. You want to know why? Because we've lost track of the most important thing. And this is a conversation worthy to have if you're a Christian or not, because at the end of your life, this is one of the filters that people are going to use to talk about you. And if you live your life for you, in the context of God's economy, you will not be first. You will not be first. But if you choose to live a life where you're allowing your something to become nothing, and you're almost craving an opportunity to find people who have something that you have, and you know that you can't take it with you anyways, and so you've got time and energy and resources this week, but your goal, you just go, listen, I'm consumed with the idea that I want to make sure that on my last day on this earth, I've given it all away. I've used it in the same way that Jesus used his life. Then you got to keep wrestling with the idea of what does it look like in your life to allow your something to become nothing. And here's the cool thing. Here's the cool thing. at my life, and you should think about this. In my life, I want people walking up at my funeral holding one of my ping pong balls. And going, I didn't even know who this guy was, but I was just doing life, and I bumped into him, and there was just something along the way, or my kids get up and they go, listen, my dad wasn't perfect, but here's what I know. He gave me one of these. Listen, I know that my dad loved me no matter what, but one of the ways that I could see his love for me, because he could have did all these different things in his life, and he could use his time and his energy and his resources. But you know what, for my dad, the most important thing wasn't his job, it was a relationship with me, and I know that because he gave me one of his ping pong balls. I want people who walk up on this stage and go, man, I didn't really know Matt, and I just bumped into him this one random time, but I was at this place, and I just really needed some help, and he didn't even know me, but he just walked to me and he paid that bill for me, and I got one of his ping pong balls. At the end of your life, how you use your something and how I use my something will determine the stories that people tell about us. And you can build a resume, but it's just not as fun as building a legacy. Just not as fun. And we have fallen into the trap in the local church, and I need to own this, and you need to own this, and it has to do with the culture in which we live, but there's way too many people who call themselves followers of Jesus, who show up at church every single week, and all they're thinking about is themselves. And they're walking in and they're critiquing the environment of the church, and they're critiquing the worship, and they're critiquing the speaker, and go, man, that was just so boring, and I can't believe that pastor's up there. He didn't have a tie on, or what's he doing, and blah, blah, blah. You're just thrown up all over the place, and you go to check in your kids and children's ministry, and the check-in didn't work, and I cannot believe, right? And you're just doing all this stuff. And friends, you need to hear Jesus this morning, that if he was walking along with you, here's what he'd say. Hey, come here for a sec. Hey, come here for a sec. It ain't working. Just come here for a sec. Just come here for a sec. Just come here. You want to be great? Yeah. You want to be the best mom you can be? Yeah. You want to be the greatest husband you can be? Yeah. You want to be the greatest in the context of being a follower of me? Yeah. Well, come here for a sec. I think you have forgotten the most important thing. This is not about you. This is not about you. And I know it's not about you. Because when I came, I could have made this thing all about me, but instead I made it all about you. We need to be a church that's getting in the room every single week, and we're just going, hey, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? How can I help? We should be looking for opportunities to serve. And I get it. Some people say, well, I didn't know. I didn't know there was a need in the local church. Listen, there's a need in the local church. There's kids that need to be served this morning. There's students on Wednesday nights. There's group leaders that need to be rising up. Listen, we got to be serving each other in such a way that the world who wants nothing to do with the church should be looking at us and going, that's crazy. Why would all those people use their something not for themselves but for somebody else? And friends, we know the reason why is because that's what Jesus did. And the reason why we're talking about him 2,000 years later is because humility was at the core of how he lived. But you want to be great, then you got to figure this out. And if you're not serving somebody somewhere, you're not as close to Jesus as you think. And you can come here and put your hands raised up every single week, and you can give, just whatever. But I'm just telling you, if you're not serving somebody somewhere, you're not as close to Jesus as you think. Because Jesus himself said, I did not come to be served, but to serve. If you're a partner here, if Rocky is your local church and you're not serving somebody somewhere, then you got to walk out of these doors and find somebody at one of those desks and go, I got to start serving. I need to go help out in kids. I need to go help out in students. I can be on guest services. I think I can play an instrument, something, okay? And that's not, and then we just don't go, done. No. Then you get up tomorrow and you go to your workplace and you go, listen, I got to serve somebody somewhere because the most important thing in my life is to be nothing just like Jesus. And we keep entering every arena in our life just like that. And this is what gets me excited. What would happen in this local church if the 2,000 adults who gathered between both of our campuses this morning actually took that conversation serious? It changed the world 2,000 years ago. It can do it again. Value others above yourself. That's what Jesus did. If you're a follower of him, it's what he calls you to. And at the end of your life, whether you believe in him or not, it's how this world, it's how the people closest to you will judge. Use what you have now for the sake of others in the context of eternity. Let me pray for you. Father, this morning we thank you for a story that happened 2,000 years ago that really changed the hearts of the disciples, that these are the guys that would lead the first church. Made them think about what is the most important thing. And I pray that that conversation even this morning would challenge our hearts and our minds once again. I want us to be great. And you want us to be great, but not for fame or for fortune or for self-glory. I want us to be great because we're going to be a church that goes, people are the most important thing, that we're going to humble ourselves just like Jesus did, for the sake of the person sitting beside us this morning, for the sake of the person who's in our community who is still far from you, for the sake of the person that's in need of something that we have. Let us be a church that keeps walking around going, how can we help? That we will be a church that's going to fight not for the front of the line, but the back of the line. Because in your kingdom, the servant is the greatest of all. Would you help us to live out this value in such a way that people who are far from you, the critics and the skeptics, would begin to ask why we live the way we live. So show us and challenge us. None of us this morning are perfect in this area of our life. May this be the year that we go a little bit deeper in our service for others, being motivated by humility that Jesus himself demonstrated on a cross. And Father, we love you, and we thank you for the greatest act of love and humility on display, Jesus, the author and perfecter, and the reason why we've gathered here this morning. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.